Hey, folks, welcome to BeyondTheBaselines.com podcast. I'm Ed Shanafi, and today we've got Ben Nichols from all the way from the UK. Pidel 22 is his company, and I'm going to start and ask him, why is it called Pidel 22, Ben? What's the reasoning behind that name?
Oh, well, hi Ed, and hi
Hi.
everyone. Absolute pleasure to be on. I'll tell you more about Panel 22, but the name itself came from, I'd love to say it was a really expensive marketing meeting and process. Actually, I have to credit my wife. When I was coming up with the idea of the agency, I explained I love the idea of a name and number together. There's a soccer website called Copper 90, and I've always loved that kind of combination. And at the time, I thought it has to have paddle in the title. There's not enough recognition around the sport to be too clever with it. And the number 22, well, it's generally 2v2 players, and this was in 2022. So that was the kind of synopsis, and we kept that since.
Lots of marketing strategy behind that one.
Exactly. Yeah, moral of that story is you can do it on the fly, I think.
I was very impressed. I went back, looked at your LinkedIn, looked at your biography, and a lot of people don't know I was in England for 20 years. My wife was in sports marketing, head of sports marketing for Hill and Knowlton and Gray Global. And you guys over there in the UK, you have such great marketing and sponsorship and PR for sports. She was with Gillette and Britvic with Andy Murray. She was with Andy Murray from the beginning, then Roger Federer. But you guys are so global in your outlook. And I think this is a big part of what you're trying to do here with, and you say paddle, I say pedal. It's okay. We can, it's like the Gershwin song. But
Yeah,
the Brits have this global look because you play globally all the time. Your football is global.
yeah,
World Cup. Your rugby is global. It's New Zealand. It's South Africa. It's
yeah,
and you are bringing that globalization to Padel.
yeah.
How are you focusing yourself and your company in this global sport that's growing?
Yeah, no, it's a really interesting observation. I've always, a proud Brit, but always very internationally minded. I've had the opportunity to work. I worked for a couple of years in Dubai as press officer of the Dubai Tennis ATP WTA Championships there for a few years. Worked in Canada, where I led media relations for the World Anti-Doping Agency. Worked in Formula One. So I've always had, when I chose a career in sport, I've always, I guess kind of partly design. I've always kind of angled for the roles that are more international in nature, and I've had that interest. So I guess sport, if you want it to be, can be truly international in terms of how you work in a career in that way. So I've always, pushed that. I think when it comes to paddle, I came up with the idea of as the sport started to really accelerate 4 years ago here in the UK, I came up with the idea of right, there's a lot of businesses, a lot of investment, a lot of courts being built, clubs being built. I'd say, 2 or 3 years ahead of the US. And I didn't see many people or anyone really focused on the storytelling, PR side of things. And I thought, I really want to work in this sport, number one. And number two, the opportunity to do so is now. And I thought, I was in a great place to do it with my experience. So I really kind of wanted a new entrepreneurial chapter, I guess, to my career and saw an opportunity to make this, not just a UK business, that the UK paddle market is significant, but, I don't see it as without borders. That's why I put a lot of energy and effort into the US because I feel it's going to be a very big sport there in the years to come. Obviously, a much bigger, larger country with other, cultural kind of sports, and then you've got pickleball in the mix. But I think in the long run, paddle is going to be a really popular sport. So I very much saw it through a lens of, I'm building this from the UK, but the US was the next country I put my energy into. And to be honest, actually most of my work now is more US than UK. And yeah, very much saw it as, the lofty goal is I call it the new paddle world. It's the countries, the non-Hispanic countries where the sport is, kind of new or newish. Those are the markets. So, there's a huge amount to play with there. South Africa, Australia, the Middle East countries, some of the European nations that are out, away from the Mediterranean, they're all quite new to the sport. So there's a lot of countries building paddle right now, and it's a really exciting space to be in. I thought with my background and my kind of outlook, hopefully I'm in a good place to, yeah, work on that storytelling at the international level.
I don't want to badmouth my native country. I'm a dual citizen, but we are so insular. My wife says, "Golly Moses, you guys call the baseball World Series, and it's anything but, right?" I mean, and so coming over from the UK to sell a new sport or
Yeah,
tell the story of a new sport to what I think is kind of an insular country in terms of sport.
sure.
We have the NFL, doesn't really translate that far beyond our borders. Um, are you finding any obstacles in your work, or is it they've got to be some obstacles here?
Yeah, no, I totally hear you. I think yeah, I would mitigate that by saying I totally understand that lens. I think as well, you've got such a big country, really, that I understand how people concentrate on, the domestic sports and the domestic side of things because there is so much to play with, right? There's so many options. Yeah, I think, yeah, coming back to your earlier point, London, absolutely, global city and a global outlook in terms of the sports available and absolutely, I think it's the kind of epitome of globalization and sport in that way. Um, Am I facing challenges with it? Look, not yet. I think I'm very much still in this phase where the sport is really early days. In the paddle bubble in the US, we like to think, it's the next big thing. Yes, but there's a hell of a long way to go before this sport is known by, the person on the street. So I'm not a kind of, the big drive right now, I think, with the sport is building courts and awareness going in tandem. Not facing that many obstacles in terms of friction to the sport. The biggest obstacle is just complete lack of awareness. And that comes from, hopefully the work I do, hopefully celebrities, hopefully mainstream media and broadcast coverage, um, content creators on social media, people seeing physical courts in the street. It's all got to work in tandem together. And eventually, the percentage of Americans who've heard of paddle will go up and up. There's an interesting, stats in the UK that, a few years ago, probably awareness of paddle was 15-20%. And now we're at, maybe above 50, so 55%, one or two studies, but it gives you an idea of, again, smaller country, it gives you an idea of how quickly it's growing in a country like the UK, and it will take longer in America. But that's not to say I think all the ingredients are there for this to be a mass participation popular sport. So no barriers right now. The only barrier is, just how quick we can build this thing.
55% players or 55% people know the sport?
55% of no, 55% of the British public have an awareness of paddle. Again, this is
Okay.
it's a straw poll done at a moment in time. But the interesting thing is, they did a similar thing a year ago, and that number was 40%, 43%, I think it was. So, we're seeing awareness go up much. We have a population of 70 million, so much smaller than the US. But the awareness is going up quite rapidly because people are seeing courts built. They're seeing these ex-athletes play, and it's become the new trendy sport to play when you hang up your boots. So I think you're going to see that in the US. It will take longer, but I think it will become a sport people want to get involved in.
Uh, in terms of how we accept it or market it in the US compared to how you accept it and market in the UK, what are the differences? Is there a difference on the court in the way we're playing it? And is there a difference in the way we're perceiving it as a country?
It's a really interesting one. If I look at the US, kind of very early stage US paddle market right now, it is in comparison to somewhere like the UK, much more seen as an elitist, very high-end sport for the kind of 1%. Some in the UK would say it's like that here, but there's a much bigger spread of places to play and price points. In the US, by and large, and big generalization, it is seen as kind of a sport if you can afford it. And not everywhere, but a lot of places. And I think that to some people that's nice because it's aspirational and it makes you want to strive to get into the clubs and kind of be part of that set. At the same time, in terms of growing it on a mass scale, what does that do for kind of growing it as quickly as people would like? That's open for a bigger debate. But I think. Yeah, paddle is being positioned right now as this very kind of on-trend, fashionable, modern country club style sport. And I think that has good things and bad things associated with it. Good things, as much as it might not be fashionable to say, we all like to strive to the next level. We all like to get into the club. We can't quite get into. We all strive for as human beings for that next kind of, I guess, level of success or wealth or whatever it may be. So whilst we might not be able to get in through that door initially, we continually want to try. So I think that that's not a bad thing with positioning. However, on that flip side, and I've alluded to it, I think if we want to grow this into colleges, into schools, into the everyday play on the street, the likes of which pickleball can do because of not a big cost with building courts, that's a slower way to build it. So, do we want this sport to be behind closed gates? Do we want it to be on every street corner? I'd like to think it will be somewhere in between, and the middle classes and people in the middle will be able to afford it as well. But it's going to take some time. So, sorry, long answer to your question, but I think that is the main difference I'm seeing in the US is it's, very much seen as that elite end. The UK, it is a little bit more mainstream. But, again, there's a price point.
Yeah, so I'm involved with the Boulevard Tennis and Padel Club now. We took out our stadium court, which we use maybe 10 times a year. And people didn't like playing on it because it was so big for tennis. The balls would roll 25 feet away because you had space for the officials, the ball kids, all that. We put in 3 Padel courts and they are amazingly popular. We've worked really hard on is what you're doing, introducing the game to Vero Beach, Florida, to Florida. I mean,
Yep,
South Florida, Miami is a mecca for Padel.
it
But
is.
and that's why Racket X is really down there is because of Padel.
Hmm.
We put it in. We're the only courts between West Palm and Orlando, so we have a
Yep,
good catchment area, and we have 80 members. We're going to cap it in a few more memberships. We're going to cap it because we're full. I mean, in the mornings, it's like squash. You go from 8 to 11 stops.
yep,
Then you have like 12 to 1, maybe the gents and the women come out at lunch. They have a quick hour, they shower, they go back to their law firms. And then
yep,
at 4:30, 5 o'clock, you start getting the business people back out again.
yep.
What we struggled with as a club, and I'm going to ask you about this,
Mm.
is the model that we use. Do we do what they do in New York, which is court time? Is it a membership for Padel or do we charge? I mean, New York's $240 an hour for a court, right? We're at 200 really for 240 for an hour and a half. But
Yep.
we did it on the membership model because we were a member club. So, this was the hardest thing we had to think about. Do we charge the same for Padel as a tennis membership? Do we include it in the tennis membership as an amenity? No way. We didn't want to do that. So what we ended up
Mm.
doing was doing a Padel membership, same cost as tennis.
Right.
If you want to do tennis and Padel combined, that's a little higher. And your
Hmm.
guest fees, if you come in off the street, which we're still allowing in some ways up to a certain number of visits because we're trying to build the game, that's
Yep.
$60 for the hour and a half. If you come
Yep.
in with a member, it's 25. So
Yeah.
that's where we're at right now, subject to change. What are you seeing in the industry?
Yeah. A bit of trial and error, to be honest.
It's what it is. Yeah.
It is. Look, none of us have the answers really. We can, profess we know absolutely the right model, but we're all figuring this out to an extent because we're doing this for the first time with a sport like paddle. So, what's the right model? Without sitting on the fence for the sake of it, it is somewhere in the middle. I think a hybrid is kind of a sweet spot right now. I think bringing paddle in within an existing membership as an amenity, what a nice thing, but actually, I don't think sustainable. I think you've got to have a price point to it. Look, we're trying to introduce as many players to it at the same time, aren't we? So it's that dilemma. Look, I think it's probably like a little bit of a hybrid where let me give an example that there was an operator in the UK that remained nameless, but I know they've had challenges having brought in a lot of founding memberships at the beginning, which with a lot of goodwill that came with, and then obviously lo and behold, it became popular and their clubs grew and more people wanted to play, and the membership members were kind of, I guess, hogging the courts to an extent. And was that financially a good thing for the club as a business? Probably
Right.
not. So there's
No.
a little bit of backtracking, as I understand it, where they kept the members to an extent, but they had to change the benefits or reduce the benefits. Not easy from a public relations communications point of view to kind of backtrack on people who've thrown their loyalty in at the start. So, but did they know that at the time? Probably not. So you don't want to get to a situation like that because you do lose members, and I know a lot of them, were disgruntled as they might be. So yeah, I think you've really got to think carefully about how much you deliver at the start, as much as you want volume through the door. You're right. I kind of think a bit of a hybrid where you have a paddle membership. There's an increased cost to that, rather than throwing it in as something that's packaged within your existing facilities. Because yeah, you're trying to generate revenue. Ultimately, this is a new revenue stream. You're a business, and if people get as hooked as we think they do with paddle, there's always price sensitivity, but they'll hopefully convert. Yeah, I think a lot of clubs I'm seeing are trying a pay and play versus a membership because and actually the US is doing this quite well at the high end. I talked about the high end of the sport, but building this kind of community modern country club thing where you've got your cold plungers and saunas, paddle, great coffee, good smoothie bar, all of these nice modern amenities. people will pay to that, and it's a great way of keeping an atmosphere in your club, keeping people off the court, in there as long as possible. So I think not only is it good for atmosphere, it's good for the financials of the club. It's good for the social aspect for the people coming. A lot of people want that, third place, third
Hmm.
space, as we call it. And I think, without going off topic, I think the thing paddle has kind of really hit home in is kind of this post-pandemic, become this social sport where we all had a tough time for a while with lack of social interaction, and it steps in as a healthier alternative to going to a bar. You get to play sport, you get to be social, you get to meet people, all of these things which we weren't able to do for a few years. And it's come along at a time when also gives some people new things. We've all grown up with tennis and golf and other sports that did this so well for years. So I think it's a combination to your answer, and I think it's about, yeah, I think you've got to have a membership there to build up a community. That said, there are clubs that will, just decide this is a transactional thing, and they might even have a digital touch in and touch out to courts, and that they don't profess to be anything more than that. And there's a place for that.
Big cities.
Yeah. Yeah, babe. Yeah, you're
Yeah,
right. Yeah,
I
you're right.
I think
Yeah.
so. So the thing we noticed too is with one tennis court, you can put three padel courts in, and the footfall in the cafe, the
Hmm.
socialization is higher. Now, here's what we're noticing at Boulevard.
Yep.
The demographic of the people playing tennis is different from the people that play padel. Padel tend to be a little more upmarket. I
Hmm.
dare say wealthier. We actually
Hmm.
introduced a seasonal membership because most of the people that are playing padel are down here for the season at their second or third or fourth home, right?
Yeah. Okay.
And so we introduced a seasonal membership. They are much more social and stay after compared to the tennis folks. The tennis folks come in,
Yep.
use the facility, and leave.
Yep.
Padel come in, use the facility, and hang out, have a coffee, have a beer, have a snack.
Yep.
And what you say, I noticed, and I'm going to give them a plug. Six Love Sports. I don't know if you
Yep.
know them, but
Andy,
uh,
Andy Newgarden. Yeah.
yeah, they are creating a community with Padel, and it's
Yeah.
evident on their Instagram. It's evident where they are, what they're promoting, and how they're doing it. And
Yeah.
that's the way I think clubs have to look at it: is that you create. It's almost like a subset community. Now, and I say this because our tennis players, they don't like Padel. We've had very few crossovers from the
Interesting.
tennis, only a handful, maybe out of the 80, maybe 10%, maybe eight.
Yeah.
So I think it's a different community. It's a different sense of social awareness and social creativity that the club
Hmm.
has to present to keep those Padel people there. I think you're spot on with that.
Really interesting. Yeah, well, yeah, big supporter of Six Love Sports. What Andy's doing, yeah, very clever. It's
Yeah.
lends itself to being this social sport, and people, whether they're doing business, creating friendships, whatever it may be, and paddle is the kind of conduit, the vehicle through which they can. It breaks down barriers. I have another business I've set up with a guy in property called Property and Paddle, and I mentioned that because we did that because we saw this big crossover in the UK initially, but increasingly in the US, of corporates wanting to get on the paddle court and lower the barrier of that awkward kind of corporate drinks thing, and they just get on court. They're sweating there together. There's no
Yep.
kind of lose their inhibitions, and there's no formality. And then off the court, they're having a drink. They've done all the formality because there is none, and that's a great place to do business. So the corporate side, absolutely. The social side, it just lends itself, I think, because you've got four players on the court, you're close together. Most of you will be hitting a ball at some point in the rally. It's off the walls, off the cage. It's kind of quirky and dynamic. So there's some humor involved. There's a lot going on in a point. So it lends itself to being social. People can play it a lot easier than more technical sports. And I think I'm definitely seeing it become this new corporate and social sport. I'm interested to know the lack or small tennis crossover, and I'll be interested to know where that goes. Um, yeah, what's paddle picking up? Maybe people who would go and play golf normally.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I see a lot of squash players. I see a lot of
Yeah,
squash
yeah,
players,
yeah,
and I see a few pickleball people coming over saying this is a little more strategic. It's a little more of a strategic game.
yeah.
Requires a little more eye-hand coordination, I think. And they've almost outgrown pickleball. Is that if that
Right.
makes sense?
Right.
And I'm seeing a bunch of new faces that are taking it up and are a couple golfers. They're really good.
Yeah.
So we're a little test. Come back in a year and you can ask me what I've seen in another year. The courts have only been open just a year and a half, just 18 months. So
Yeah.
we'll have a lot more data after another 18 months.
Be really interesting. Really interesting.
This, this, this yeah, this kind of leads me onto this odd question, and this is something from my business point, but I'm
Mhm.
noticing that there's this title shift with the people involved in teaching. We started with director of tennis, then
Yeah.
it went to director of rackets, or director of racket sports.
Mhm.
Now I'm hearing this new title called director of court sports, and I typed in
Yeah.
to ChatGPT, is that upmarket, downmarket, more elitist? And ChatGPT said less elitist, more mainstream.
Interesting.
Is that coming from Padel pickleball? Have you seen this title change over there in the UK or
Do you,
over here
do you
in the
know
US?
what? I haven't seen it come in. I am seeing more shift, whether it's clubs, whether it's titles of people to, traditional tennis clubs that have bolted on probably paddle or pickle or might have squash as well. Director of rackets for sure.
Yeah. Yep.
And I think that's a natural evolution. Look, I'm not a paddle purist. I'm actually a big fan of pickleball, and I grew up playing squash and tennis. So I'm very much that kind of racket X philosophy of, it's a collective in my view. Um, and I buy into this idea that clubs, can bolt on other racket sports, and everyone can win in that way. It's not every case, but I think that is generally a good way to look at it. And I think, yeah, bringing on your teams and your professionals who are able to help grow memberships and run clinics across multiple racket sports. I think that's a healthy way to look at it. So no, I'm saying director of rackets and that kind of role, but not the court. That hasn't come in yet,
Coming
but
in. Okay. Director of court
maybe
sports.
it
I've
will.
heard it.
Maybe it
I've heard
will.
it now 3 or 4 times, and it's definitely a growth. This brings me to another point. I get bids. People with the RFPs. You have a software that pumps out any government municipality bid, and I get them all in my emails.
Mhm.
And now every once a week, I'm seeing a municipality asking for a bid to rip up pickleball courts and put back a tennis court, or hopefully put in a padel court, or
Yeah.
whatever it may be. Are you worried in any way? A bit like pickleball, I think, has been overbuilt. There's now a few pickleball clubs that are struggling, that they can't get enough usage, they can't find enough membership. Are you worried that we're overbuilding Padel this fast? I mean, you're trying to grow it so fast. Are you worried
Yeah.
in any way that it's growing too fast?
I'm not. And here's why. I think there's similarities again if I take the UK and US in terms of the two countries that generally have pretty strict planning, planning, we call it planning permission, as you know, permitting
Yep.
in the US, I believe. There's a lot of red tape. I know it's state by state, but generally it's not easy to quickly build a paddle court. The enthusiasm and the will is there from entrepreneurs who are generally, impatient in a good way. But you've got to work through the authorities, which is not a quick fix. So you're not going to compare that with a Sweden. Sweden's a really interesting example. It's kind of the poster child for how can I put it nicely? How not to build paddle. They built a lot of paddle courts very quickly around the time of the pandemic. They have pretty liberal planning laws there, and they overbuilt. Sweden's, how many million on one or two hands? The UK 70 million. It's They built a lot of paddle courts in big arenas of kind of 2021 courts.
Mm-hmm.
In places which just didn't have the populations to fill them. And during the pandemic, you could kind of mask over the cracks of everyone was working from home. It was advertised as this socially distanced, acceptable sport. People came to play, and then lo and behold, people go back to traditional working patterns, and all of these centers are, not all of them, but a lot of them are dormant, and a lot of them are closed. So I mention that because Sweden is a really useful example of the rest of the world of be careful of how quickly you build. UK, we're not seeing that because I think again the planning laws mean it is happening in a sustainable way. That's not the intent, I don't think, but it is meaning it's growing probably at a pace which we can manage. And I don't think we'll get oversupply. Similarly, in the US, I don't think you're going to get oversupply in a quick way. I think there will be closures and there will be casualties, but that I wouldn't say that's necessarily from having way too many centers in a short geography, in a closed geography. I would say it's more kind of going to be down to people that haven't thought about how they activate memberships, clinics, do their marketing and PR correctly, create the awareness for the sport and create the excitement around it. I think it would probably be more bad operational and business decisions rather than, um, you know, people kind of planting paddle centers too close to each other, in my view. But let's see how it plays out.
Best city in the world right now for paddle?
Oh wow. I'm gonna say London, not because it's home, because it's the most interesting right now. We've got the UK has kind of been dubbed the world's most social paddle nation. And what do I mean by that? There's a tech app you might be familiar with called Playtomic, which powers a
Mhm.
lot of the court bookings in the UK, about 85%. And they have a lot of stats around the sport. And the interesting thing is they have this thing called open matches, which is it's the algorithm, it's the tool on their tech that basically partners up four strangers or random people together to play paddle who have been assessed, I guess, through the algorithm. And it's creating all these matchup. The biggest pain point of paddle is finding your four players, but it matches up these people who've never met before, get on court, and by and large, hopefully at the right standard. And it's just creating this kind of, again, talk about this social side, people having a good game on court and then having a drink afterwards and becoming friends or whatever it leads to. So it's kind of becoming a catalyst for this social side of paddle. And the interesting thing about the UK is I read a stat the other day that the highest proportion of these open matches versus overall bookings is the UK. So here's this country you know well, which people see us as reserved and reticent. And
Oh, I'll tell you stories.
I mean, yeah, ever seen anyone talk to each other on
Took
the
me nine
ground?
years to get to a dinner party.
Well, there you go. Anyone
I'm
who's been
terrible.
on the underground knows no one speaks to each other. However, lo and behold, the UK is incredibly social and mixing in every way through paddle. So a really interesting case study. And London's at the heart of that. So there's clubs being built, and people are, it's becoming an after work thing, a before work. These clubs are opening at 5, 6 a.m. Because they can monetize this court time as well. So London's a really interesting market. You ask a lot of brands and businesses, and they'll say London is, the number one market right now in terms of where it's going. Of course, we know the background with Spain and Argentina and where the kind of, the hubs of the sport are. But I think the interesting thing is looking at where they're going now. So London right now, but I would put my mark on, Miami. We know is a bit of a hub. I'd put my mark on a few US cities joining that soon.
Is padel taking away from tennis or pickleball more, do you think? I mean, we've already discussed this a little bit, but if you had
Hmm.
to choose one, what do you think? Or is
Um,
it not taking away from them at all? Is it just bringing up racket sports, as we might all
Well,
say?
yeah, I mean, the kind of idealistic view is bringing up racket sports. There'll be some nuance to that. I'm going to give you the British example just because we're a little bit further along the line. The fashionable thing to say is, and journalists like to create this drama is, the paddle is threatening tennis, and tennis is in trouble. I don't believe that's the case. I think if anything, yes, there's a lot of tennis players here moving to paddle because perhaps they're in middle age and they want a new challenge and something fun to get their teeth into. But by and large, I think people are going to actually play all these sports. I think you're getting a lot of people playing paddle who have just, for whatever reason, been put off by tennis and golf and squash or more technical sports and are coming into paddle afresh, not with any rackets or even any sports background. That's an interesting one because you've got a whole new audience there. So I don't see it as one-way traffic that paddle affects tennis. I think you're going to get some paddle players who kind of, I hate to say it, evolve and into tennis, which is a more technical, you could say more advanced sport in some ways. I think you're going to get traffic going in all directions. In the US, obviously slightly different because of the pickleball journey. If I was a betting man, I would say you're going to get more coming over from tennis to paddle. But I was interested, obviously, in your observation earlier about pickleball, and maybe that's going to be there'll be some in pickle who feel like it's had its sell by date and they need something a bit more progressive. So,
I think our two countries are so different, and I've
yeah.
lived in both for about majority of half my life in both, and about half my life in each. And I've played collegiate tennis in both, and they're so different. Tennis over here, I'm going through it with my daughter. It's a massive recruiting.
Yeah.
I mean, I did it 30 years ago. She's doing it now, and we have this portal where kids are making money, and there's NIL, and tennis is in the Olympics. It's so ingrained in a parent, and I'm not saying I'm one of those, but you have to fight it. That say, hey, I need some money to get my kid through school.
Yeah.
Tennis is her ticket, my ticket, whatever. We're going D3. There's not that much money, but I played tennis over there too collegiately. I played London School of Economics, and we
Yeah.
played, all. But it doesn't have tennis doesn't have the grit for that age group that we have here, and therefore maybe it's not as ingrown as I
Yeah.
might say, and they might be easier to go over to paddle. Even though I'm playing paddle 4 days a week. I play tennis maybe one day a week with my daughter,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I think our countries are so different in how we view tennis as a
Yes.
junior.
Yes.
Um,
I think you're right. You're absolutely right. And we don't have that because of many reasons. But we don't have that, competitive university system where you're aspiring to,
right.
think years ahead and get your kids into the best college through. It's just not that culture here. So yeah, maybe that's right. Maybe look, I think where paddle becomes interesting is if and when we start to see this become an Olympic sport. I'd like to think it's when, but if and when, in the US, this starts to filter into the NCAA and the systems and
Correct.
public courts, and we're way away from that. But someone's got to do it at some point. There must be some
Exactly.
lawyers out
Well,
there
that's
thinking about
you. That's what you're
it.
trying to do.
Well, yeah, I mean that's a big ask, right? I got to settle
I
into
mean,
Boston,
I
but
just never forget going out. Like, I played D1 tennis, barely made the team, quit after my freshman year. It's just too much.
yeah.
But over there, I mean, I'm in what was it? I forget. They were in a square in the London School of Economics. I played number three behind two other Americans. It was like the boat race comes to the tennis club. It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
Harvard and Yale. I was Princeton and Haverford, and I was from Duke.
Yeah.
And then we have one token Brit on the team playing number four, and it
I
was
know.
hilarious.
I just
But we
watched the
had
boat race the other day, and
Oh
you're
my God,
absolutely
the
right.
boat race. It's all Americans. I mean,
All
come
Americans,
on.
all Americans,
And
exactly.
what's so yeah, they're all doing there's no problems with eligibility. So I went over and
Exactly.
as a grad student played tennis, and it was the best couple of years. I loved it. I played
Yeah,
Southampton, I played Oxford, I played Cambridge. You get on the lawns. I mean, one of my women teammates was a member
yeah,
at Wimbledon. We played All American at the
yeah,
All England Club.
yeah,
It's just such a different feel, and
for
I
sure.
think that will tell a Padel story differently in the future. But who knows? All right,
Yeah,
last question for you, and
yes.
this is a fun one. What if if you were advising a club board uh, with one shot to get Padel right? The governors don't know the sport really. The club manager is like, oh, I got to spend money, $150,000 a court. I got to
Yep.
get asphalt people in. I got to get drainage people in. What do you tell them to get it right?
Um, wow. I mean, there's, there's one, well, overall, you've got to have a great program. Yeah, it's cliche programming and clinics and really get that humming. So you've got to have a great personal people at the top who, are just, again, this new sport, they've got to educate people around. They've just got to have the right combination of sessions for different standards, different people. They've got to get foot traffic on court and lots of it just to get the enthusiasm up. So running, the simple and quite boring answer is running a good program.
It's programming.
It's programming. The more interesting answer, I know you've asked for one, is why not at some point organize, to kick it off, organize a great exhibition between top paddle players, and pull together, some bleacher seating and make a bit of a stadium court and invite your members to see the best in the world or the best in the country play it. Because when you see paddle, as you will have done on, YouTube or online, and they're running out of the court, I mean, it's a whole different level. And when you see that, you're getting your head around this pretty maverick sport where they're, jumping out of the court and hitting it over the top, and it's unusual, right? So when you see that, I mean, that gets people really humming and amazed at this sport. So I think, there's two things. One, you want to see what it can be at the very high level. And then two, you need the practical side of, right, let's get people on court and let's just introduce as many as possible to this sport. So there's two very different ways of doing it, but the programming has to trump all of it, really.
You nailed it because what clubs I think are getting wrong is not enough programming. And I say that for tennis, I say that for pickleball, and I'm going to say it for padel, is that it's like real estate. Programming, 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 location, location, location. It's
Yeah,
how you make revenue. And that's the only way you're going to make revenue and pay somewhat for those expensive courts is through programming. Hey, Ben,
absolutely.
it's been fantastic having you on the podcast. You made me excited. I want to go play padel now again. I just love the sport.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm super excited about my move to the East Coast and got a good reason to come down to Vero Beach
Please
and
come down and play a few games, few sets, few days. And if I'm passing through Charleston, that's where you're moving to.
yes,
Um, really look forward to meeting you in person, and I'm sure we'll meet at Racket X or one of those conferences sometime soon, if not
absolutely.
before.
Brilliant. Yeah, thank you so much, Ed.
Thanks, Ben.